defending the situation. I will say this. The cop was following the procedure.
Never said I oppose fracking. Show the tape. Put it on your website. Put it on the website.
Live from Clark Studios in Rochester, New York. Broadcasting around the world. You're listening to You Made It Political, where the voice of the keyboard warrior is finally heard and the arguments presented are put to the political test. And now, here's your host, Matt Clark.
We all know the left-wing media lies. I mean, that's what they do. The, CNN, MSNBC, every single one of them, they do whatever they can to trash the right, to trash former President Trump, to trash pretty much everything that stands in their way of getting the job done, or at least the job that they think is for the good of the American people, which we all know it's not. It never is. So lately, we've had a whole round of doctors come out trashing former President Trump for some weird reason. Who knows? I mean, the guy's left office months now, but CNN can't stop talking about him. The doctors can't stop talking about him. And the Democrats can't stop talking about him. Everybody wants to talk about what Trump didn't do right instead of looking at what the left are doing wrong. It's the MO for the Democrats, and they continue to do everything they can to destroy this man and put him in the ground, and it's not working. It's just straight up not working. CNN comes out with a documentary, a horrible documentary, or at least they reviewed the documentary of Dr. Fauci and Dr. BRIX trying to destroy Trump's reputation. And if you haven't seen it, check it out. It's an absolute joke. If you're looking for some comedy in life, watch that documentary because it is full of lies, riddled with lies. And of course, CNN is quick to jump on it and act like total idiots live on camera the other day or live on national television with practically nothing but fallacies. And I'm going to prove to you guys just how wrong everybody is during today's show. Welcome to the show today, everybody. It's what day is it? It's Wednesday morning here on the East Coast. Thank you for tuning in wherever you guys are in the world. Let's get straight into the show. So, Dr. BRIX goes on to this documentary and basically slams Trump and talks about all the bad that he did, talks about how he did nothing right. And it gives her a platform and an opportunity to look like an absolute freaking drama queen. Okay? That's all these people constantly do. They just look like rambling, overly dramatic idiots at the end of the day. And I'm going to show you guys just how stupid they all sound. So if you haven't watched the documentary, I don't know where it is. I don't care to watch it. I think the whole thing's an absolute shit show to begin with. I think all anybody wants to do today is point the finger at Trump instead of taking ownership. The new administration does nothing but blame the former administration for everything that they do wrong today. We know that. But they had to take it one step further. They had to get 6 doctors together and have them come out with their dramatic story on everything that made them feel uncomfortable during the Trump administration, everything that Trump did wrong. So let's listen to CNN dissect this, and then I'll weigh in on my own opinion.
What a documentary this was last night. I mean, I was riveted seeing these 6 the country's top health officials speak out for the first time. And there was really a sense, Dr. Wen, I got of them having had pent up things to say.
First of all, I'm going to stop it right there. Okay. We're talking about these 6 doctors. Remember, 6 doctors out of hundreds of thousands of qualified, incredible doctors. Do you guys realize that the only doctors that we continue to put forward regarding coronavirus, the vaccines, are left-wing liberals? Show me a conservative doctor. Let me listen to a conservative right-wing doctor. And then maybe I'll start taking this thing seriously. But the Biden administration has stacked the deck with all left-wing doctors that do nothing but support Biden's agenda, support the left's agenda. So it's hard for me to take any of these doctors seriously when they come on as puppets to the left to tell the American people not what's really going on, but what the Biden administration tells them to tell us. So I find the whole thing very hard to follow, very hard to believe, which is why they all look like contradicting idiots at the end of the day. Let's go back to the CNN footage of them talking about this documentary.
They, I believe, felt muzzled. They peeled off their muzzle last night to explain the dysfunction, the chaos, the purely partisan decisions that were made in the Trump White House that Dr. Birx says cost lives. Let me just play for anyone who missed it what Dr. Birx said about the death toll.
But I look at it this way. The first time we have an excuse, there were about 100,000 deaths that came from that original surge.
Okay, first of all, 100,000 deaths out of 389 million people is nothing to write home about. So at that point, I mean, we have more flu deaths annually than the original 100,000 deaths that started come out on coronavirus. So all of a sudden, 100,000 deaths out of 389 million people is getting all these doctors all in a frenzy, and immediately they start attacking Trump on not acting quick enough. Remember, nobody knew what was going on back then. Like, nobody, including the Democrats.
All of the rest of them, in my mind, could have been mitigated or decreased substantially if we took the lessons we had learned from that moment.
First of all, that's BS, because we had lessons to learn from. Remember, coronavirus already started in China. Then it went over to Europe and Italy. I mean, we saw what happened in Italy. And we all know that in early February, Trump locked down the border to China, at least prevented Chinese from coming over. And then eventually he did it with Italy. So he closed the borders against the wishes of Pelosi and Schumer. We all know that happened. You can go back and look at the archives. So as soon as things started getting really out of control in Italy, Trump said, we need to lock this country down. And of course, the Democrats were crying humanity rights and everything else, and they pressured him to keep it open. So she talks about if we just learned about these lessons. Well, yeah. First of all, we did learn from looking at China, Italy, we closed borders. Outside of that, I'm not sure what else you could have learned, because people were only just getting sick here or just dying in the United States.
That's what bothers me every day.
Of course she's bothered every day. It's just horrible to hear that. Dr. Wen, what did you hear last night?
Yeah, I mean, I was also very struck by the comments by Dr. Birx, because what she was basically saying was the initial wave of tragedy, maybe that was hard to prevent because it was like a freight train coming at us 100 miles per hour, and before you know it, it was already on top of us. But after that, we knew what to do. We knew about masking. We knew about the importance of testing.
So we knew what to do, did we? Did we really know what to do? Because from what I gather, Democratic governors turned the coronavirus into an absolute shit show. So if we knew what to do, then why didn't all the Democratic governors start doing what they were supposed to do? I remember Cuomo not having enough ventilators, scrambling for ventilators. I remember Trump throwing a ship to New York, to the coast, and Cuomo, out of spite, not using the ship. I remember Trump saying, listen, we've got ventilators. Do you need ventilators? Cuomo saying, no, I've got it covered. You look at California. Did Newsom know what to do? So when she says we knew what to do and we didn't do it, well, you can't tell Trump that state governors run the states and that we don't want him in his involvement. But then when things go horribly wrong, you start saying, well, Trump, you failed. You were supposed to help us out. These guys constantly contradict each other, and they look like total morons when they do it, because they don't want to take advice from Trump when he's right. But the second that the state governors get it wrong, they want to slam Trump. And this is all they've been doing since the very beginning. And I don't care, even if Trump wasn't president, if it was another Republican, this has nothing to do with Trump himself. This has to do with the fact that any president in that situation who would have tried to call the shots would have gotten overrun by the state governors, because the states control their own state, as they constantly reminded and threw back in Trump's face.
We knew about not having mixed messaging, and this active disinformation prevented us from actually saving lives. But I think what struck me even more last night, Allison, was how much when Sanjay asked everyone, what is the cause? You know, if you were to diagnose what went wrong, they all gave different answers. And I think that was the most striking part, because it's not as if there was one single thing that went wrong in the response.
Yeah, they all gave different answers because they all had no clue what the hell was going on. The whole world had no clue what was going on. Doesn't matter who the leader of this country would have been. That person would have gotten all the blame, no matter what they would have done. I mean, Fauci's supposed to be the guy running the show, right? So we asked Fauci, masks or no masks? Nope, no masks. As soon as Fauci started flip-flopping, we knew that the whole thing was a shit show. We knew that every other day there was a new rule. That's why there were different messages. Trump's not a doctor. Trump has no freaking clue what to do with coronavirus. He turned to the experts. The experts looked like morons every time they flip-flopped. So Trump said, the hell with you guys. You have no idea what you're talking about. The media is hijacking this entire situation. They want to help the Democrats play politics. I'm done with it. So he started taking matters in his own hands and started telling the American people to calm down. It's a virus. We'll get through this eventually. That's all you can do. We saw what happened with the flu pandemic in 1918. 2 years, 50 million people died. Herd immunity. Very simple situation to navigate through as long as you understand that. But our country wanted to play politics. So they continue to go on, and as you'll see in this little CNN review, they just sound like total babbling idiots at the end of the day that have no idea. They don't even know what they're talking about. Let's listen.
There were so many. And actually, this is similar to many cases of medical error where something went tragically wrong. Very few cases could you say, it was that one moment. If we had done that one thing right, everything else would have been fine.
Which was what? What was that one thing we should have done? I thought masking up was that one thing we should have done. Well, we know that's a lie because masks have done nothing. And now we have the vaccine out. If we just had the Trump couldn't have gotten the vaccine out any further. But yet nobody, or any quicker. Nobody wants to talk about that, though. Nobody wants to talk about how the Democrats thought it would be impossible to get a vaccine out even within 5 years. Trump did Operation Warp Speed in 9 months. Nobody's talking about that. Nobody wants to talk about the fact that pharmaceutical companies, coordinated with the Trump administration, was able to get a vaccine out in record-breaking time. So if we only did that one thing right, she goes on to say, but we did a lot right. So what was that one thing? Tell us. Let's hear what that one thing right we should have done. I guarantee she doesn't answer because she has no freaking clue.
In this case, we missed so many moments, and that makes me really worried about the next pandemic because we have to go back and fix so many aspects of our response. It's not just one thing.
I love how we're already talking about the next pandemic, by the way. Trust me, the next pandemic, I don't think the American people are going to listen to anybody. The doctors can do whatever they want. Democrats can hide in their basements for the rest of their lives. I think the other half of the country is done when it comes to the next pandemic.
But John, the fact that so many doctors who are leaders in this administration's response came forward so quickly and with almost feeling liberated to tell the truth about what they had seen and the failures of this administration. What you heard Debbie Birx just say is that 450,000 deaths are attributable to this administration's failures. And it was.
Since then, about another 150,000 have been attributed to Biden's administration, even after the vaccine, even after masking up. That says a lot, actually. So if there were only 450,000 deaths contributed to Trump, when we had no idea what was going on for months, everybody was scrambling to try to figure out what was happening. So if there were 450,000 deaths contributed to the Trump administration, the fact that after a year, we know exactly what's going on, that we now see roughly another 150,000 deaths for the Biden administration tells me that the Biden administration is even more of a joke. because they've had the tools. They've had a year lead up. They've seen what happens in other countries. So Biden was supposed to curb the pandemic, remember? He's not, which is why these guys sound like total jackasses right now, trying to defend the Biden administration and slamming Trump. But CNN are jackasses. These guys are freaking morons when it comes to reporting the news, because all they do is use emotion rather than logic. But they get that stance from the top down, because that's exactly what the Democrats do. They rule with emotion, in irrational, supercharged liberal policy, rather than looking at the science, looking at the data. So these guys, they're not talking facts about anything. And the whole documentary that was an absolute shit show had nothing to do with facts either. It was just emotional doctors going on camera. All it was an anti-Trump bashing political stunt. That's all it was. And these reporters right here are backing up the stupidity with how ridiculous they sound.
It was not just the president. It was a trickle-down environment. I'm going to play a clip from Dr. Birx where she says that there was a fundamental environment of unseriousness while she was frozen out.
There was a feeling in the White House from the beginning, and I don't know if this is true or not because I never confronted the president because I didn't have access to him by that time, that the president was not supportive of mask wearing in the White House. And that trickled down through every single leader. I would say
good thing it's been proven that masks don't work either. Otherwise, then you'd really have something to slam Trump about. He didn't care about masks because you know why? Fauci did not care about masks. So Dr. Birx now goes on and says, President Trump was so against masks in the White House. And I can't believe it that he didn't want to mask up. Yeah, because you morons told us it was okay to not mask up. You actually deterred us from wearing masks. So it's easy to now go back and say, after we flip-flopped to wearing masks, that now I can't believe he didn't wear a mask in the White House. Yeah, because Fauci said you didn't have to. But they forget to mention that part. So many contradictory messages in this entire thing.
Say majority of the people in the White House did not take this seriously.
The majority of the people in the White House did not take this seriously. She attributes that to 450,000 Americans dead.
So what's going on now in the Biden administration? 150,000 more deaths. So are they not taking this seriously? So the video goes on and on. It's an absolute, I don't even need to play anymore. Let's get on to the statement. So Trump clearly gets a hold of this documentary. He's not going to sit by and let the media rip him apart like this. Since when does Trump sit the sidelines and just bend over for the media? Never. And he continues to stand up. He's now launched yesterday 45office.com, so he can now communicate directly to the American people. We don't need Twitter anymore. We don't need Facebook. We don't need YouTube or Instagram. Trump doesn't need any of those social media platforms. He's got his own website right now. If you guys haven't checked it out, 45office.com. He now gets to come out, put out his own statements, and that's exactly what he did yesterday when he slammed Fauci and BRICS with a comeback to the completely fraudulent and absolutely asinine documentary that came out slamming the Trump administration. Here's his remarks and his press statement in retaliation to that documentary. So former President Trump shares statement directed at doctors Fauci and Birx. The actual statement came out, for those of you who don't know, 2 days ago. Let's take a look at what it said. Based on interviews, I felt it was time to speak up about Dr. Fauci and Dr. Birx, two self-promoters trying to reinvent history to overcome or to cover for their bad instincts and faulty recommendations, which I fortunately almost always overturned. And he did. The recommendations were horrible. They didn't even know what they were talking about. So Trump had to step in and say, listen, you guys are a shit show right now. I'm done with you. I'm going to overturn these recommendations. They had bad policy decisions that would have left our country open to China and others, closed to reopening our economy, and years away from an approved vaccine, putting millions of lives at risk. Remember, 5 years they thought. They thought it'd be a miracle if we got it done in 5 years. Trump got it out in 9 months. We developed vaccines by an American president in record time, 9 months, which is saving the entire world. And it is. I don't care what you think, Democrats. You can't trash the fact that Trump came out with a vaccine in record-breaking time. That's just the deal. When you guys all get your shots, thank President Trump. You can send your cards to 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue because he's the guy who got you the vaccine. We bought billions of dollars of these vaccines on a calculated bet that they would work, perhaps the most important bet in the history of the world. Dr. Fauci and Dr. Birx moved far too slowly, and if it were up to them, we'd currently be locked in our basement as our country suffered through a financial depression. Very true. Families and children in particular would be suffering the mental strains of this disaster like never before. In a fake interview last night on CNN, Dr. Fauci, who said he was an athlete in college but couldn't throw a baseball even close to home plate, it was a roller, tried to take credit for the vaccine when in fact, he said it would take 3 to 5 years and probably longer to have it approved. Dr. Fauci was incapable of pressing the FDA to move it through faster. I was the one to get it done, and even the fake news media knows and reports this. You can't dispute that. It's 100%. And I don't care if Pfizer and Johnson & Johnson actually manufactured the vaccine. Obviously, Trump wasn't in his basement cooking up vaccines, but he oversaw and he pre-bought billions of dollars worth of vaccines at a total gamble. We didn't know if it was going to even work at that point. We still don't know if it's going to work, to be honest, from what I hear. Dr. Fauci was incapable of pressing the FDA to move it forward faster. I was the one to get it done, and even the fake news media knows and reports this. Dr. Fauci is also the king of flip-flops and moving the goalposts to make himself look as good as possible. He fought me so hard because he wanted to keep our country open to countries like China. Remember, Trump closed China early February. They fought against him to keep it open. So when they go on to say, well, Trump didn't do anything, that's bullshit. He absolutely did do something. So let's call it how it is and stop lying here. I closed it against his strong recommendation, which saved many lives. Dr. Fauci also said we didn't need to wear masks. Then a few months later, he said we need to wear masks, and now 2 or 3 of them. Fauci spent U.S. money on the Wuhan lab in China, and we now know how that worked out. Dr. Birx is a proven liar with very little credibility left. Many of her recommendations were viewed as pseudoscience, and Dr. Fauci would always talk negatively about her and, in fact, would ask not to be in the same room with her. The states who followed her lead, like California, had worse outcomes on COVID and ruined the lives of countless children because they couldn't go to school, ruined many businesses, an untold number of Americans who were killed by the lockdowns themselves. Dr. Birx was a terrible medical advisor, which is why I seldom follow her advice. Her motto should be do as I say, not as I do. Who can forget when Dr. Birx gave a huge mandate to the people of our nation to not travel and then traveled a great distance to see her family for Thanksgiving, only to have them call the police and turn her in. She then, embarrassingly for her, resigned. This is what we're dealing with. Now CNN wants to listen to these people. Finally, Dr. Birx says she can't hear very well, but I can. There was no very difficult phone call other than Dr. Birx's policies that would have led us directly into a COVID-caused depression. She was a very negative voice who didn't have the right answers. Time has proven me correct. I only keep Dr. Fauci and Dr. Birx on because they worked for the U.S. government for so long. They are like a bad habit. So Trump clearly sets the record straight. He highlights the fact that Fauci has flip-flopped and calls him King Flip-Flop. And that's exactly what Fauci is. He's King Flip-Flop. He doesn't know what he's talking about. And listen, there's no shame in admitting that Fauci doesn't have a clue. He should just come on and say, listen, I don't really know what I'm doing. Yes, I know my title is the lead pandemic expert in the world. Clearly, that means nothing because our leader in pandemics is responsible for nearly 600,000 deaths And yeah, I am telling Fauci he's responsible. Because Trump, as the president, is not a doctor. Trump tried listening to Fauci. He tried listening to Dr. Birx. They fumbled in the beginning. They were against the China lockdown, even though we knew all the cases were coming in China and ultimately from Italy. And he had enough. So he destroys them. Now in the statement, rightly so. So anybody watching that documentary needs to see this statement. And I agree with Trump coming out and slamming Fauci. Because to this day, coronavirus cases continue to grow. And they're going to grow, people. And even after you get your vaccine, they're going to grow. Because that's what a virus does. You can't run from it. The flu. How many people die of the flu every year, even after getting a flu shot? So, there's no disputing whether coronavirus exists. Of course it does. I call it a scam because of the way that we've responded to it. The way that we've acted like dictators and locked everybody's lives down. Trump would not have done this. He would have pulled rank and done everything he can to sue the shit out of Cuomo and Newsom by now, and every other Democratic state that continues to lock people down and keep kids out of school. So they keep telling us to follow the science. Trump followed the science. He didn't feel that it was worth locking down the country. Democrats, for their own political and financial gain, wanted to try to make a stance to look good for their constituents, even though it was the wrong thing to do for the states. All you got to do is go on the CDC's website and look at the data. Florida has less deaths by half, 50% less deaths than New York State. And they were continuously wide open. California, way more deaths than Florida. And California was severely, and to this day, are severely locked down. Yet they think it's okay to teach in-person class to illegal immigrants down at the border. Yet they won't even open up their own schools. This is how backwards California is. So Trump comes out, he smashes Fauci, he destroys Dr. Birx in this press release statement. We now, thankfully, have access to Trump via 45 or Office, I believe it's office45.com or 45office.com. I'll have to check out and let you guys know in a second. But we have access to that. So now we can hear the real story. Let's head over to the Keyboard Warrior Cam and see what the American people have to say about the ridiculous review of this documentary that CNN put out last night. We don't even have to listen to these bumbling idiots anymore. I mean, there's no facts with these guys. It's all bad Trump. He didn't listen. 550,000 deaths. I mean, there's no science behind any of it. They say he didn't act quick enough. So we don't have to play any more of this farce of a video. All we have to do is see what the American people have to say, because I can't be the only one who thinks this thing is a joke. I mean, if I was, I'd shut the show down and just hang my boots up tomorrow. But it's me, along with tens of millions of people, who thinks the whole thing is asinine. Let's hear what the American people have to say about the ridiculousness of what just occurred. 13,000 comments. So clearly, the American people have a lot to say. Graham says she was totally complicit, referring to Dr. Birx, in this farce, and should be held accountable. There's no excuse to remain silent just to save your job. And she has been. She's remained silent until all of a sudden, hey, Dr. Birx, can we use you now for a minute to destroy everything that Trump did? Because the left, see, they're starting to look like morons because Biden is a moron, and they're looking really bad. So we need some doctors now to come forward, and we're going to put together this like retarded documentary that slams Trump even more now, because we need to gain credibility because of how much of an idiot we've all looked throughout Biden's first 63 or 65 days in the White House. Yeah, good idea. Let's get all these doctors together. Left-wing liberal doctors, by the way. Notice how we see the problem is here. We continue to hear from doctors put forward by the Biden administration. Every time we hear from a doctor who slams the Biden administration or supports Trump, what happens? They're considered conspiracy theorists. Why? These doctors are very credible. These aren't the only 6 doctors in the entire world that know what they're talking about. Why don't we listen to right-wing doctors? Why don't we listen? And again, this should not be about politics, but it is, because the Democrats have made it political. Why don't we listen to any other doctor? Why didn't we listen to those who wanted to talk about hydrochloroquine? Why not? Isn't science supposed to be experimental? Aren't we supposed to try new things? Why couldn't we try hydrochloroquine? Why couldn't we try vitamin A, B, D? That seems to be working just as effectively as the COVID vaccine. Why can't we talk about that? Science is experimental, yet we're not allowed to listen to the side of the experiment that the left don't want you to listen to. Why? Because it's all corrupt. It's all run by the pharmaceutical companies. And if the vaccines work, then great. That's awesome, but there's a lot of people who don't want to take it. So why aren't we giving them other options? When you go to your doctor, he doesn't tell you this is the only way or the highway. He tells you, well, these are our options. We can try surgery. We can try pharmaceutical pills. We can try Eastern medicine. This is what they've tried over in Asia or other Asian countries that follow Eastern medicine. Why don't we talk about that? Or maybe you can just start being healthy and stop eating freaking French fries every single day. How about that? We don't hear any of them. We just hear vaccine. That's it. So Dr. Birx is an uncredible, blabbing idiot that's full of drama and emotion. And all she did was go online to to do what the Democrats told her to do. And that was, hey, let's just slam Trump because we have nothing else to do with our day. Because we know Biden looks like a moron. So let's make Trump look really bad now. It's like, what? Why don't you guys focus on fixing the country and maybe the border? Like, don't worry about Trump. Fix the border. That's what we should be focusing on. Get the kids back in school. Don't worry about Trump. Every time they talk about Trump, my answer to that is don't worry about Trump. Trump's gone. Okay? Worry about Trump if he comes back and runs again in 2024. Then you can worry about Trump. But if you guys continue to worry about him now and not fix America, guess what? You're not going to have a campaign to run on because Trump's going to come back and just destroy all you guys anyway. Jason has a good point. Jason says, hold on a second. Why did you wait till there was a different administration for you to speak up, Dr. Birx? There are so many ways you could have gotten the message out, but you didn't to save your job. This is very pathetic and narcissistic. It is. It's very narcissistic of all of them to now come forward. And they're all talking about, well, you know, Trump didn't listen. And yes, he did listen. You just made the wrong calls. So the Trump administration decided to challenge your calls. Han says, really? This extremely bad flu epidemic and e-cigarette farce happened back in 2019 August. Hello? Whoever heard of a flu epidemic in the summer? CNN, do some real journalism and get the truth. CNN, guys, is not real journalism. If you want to know the truth, I'm not saying that all the right-wing media platforms are any better. They're all very biased. I'll be the first to admit that. But you do need to use your head and do your own research to piece the whole thing together. CNN is just an emotional, irrational, very, very far left wing source for us. I mean, if you want to know the truth, you don't watch CNN. Okay. Again, I'm not saying that Fox News or Newsmax is where you must go for the truth. I'm not naive to think that they're also very biased. But what you do need to do is try to piece it together and do your own research today. Because if you listen to one or the other, you're just going to be involved in an echo chamber and not really know the real story. So the smart American today looks at CNN, looks at Newsmax, looks at Fox News, and kind of uses their own common sense to piece the whole thing together. The problem that we have with the far left liberal is that they're not willing to look at both sides of the story. Yes, most conservatives are. We're a little bit more common sense orientated than just textbook. And I will say that. From what I've seen, liberals tend to look at the textbook. They tend to look at one source, get their information from that source, and that's it. Their mind's made up. The conservative looks at the textbook, questions it, challenges it, debates it, then goes and does further research to then apply common sense to the situation. The Republicans are very common sense driven. Democrats are very textbook driven. Without one or the other, yes, you can get yourself into a sticky situation on both sides. I just don't think the Democrats tend to try to use both sides, whereas I think the Republicans do. And I think that's what Trump did. I think he said, okay, great, I appreciate your expertise, but at the same time, I'm not really buying into the fact that you're the only person in this world that actually knows what they're talking about. So he looked at other sources, other doctors, which is what I thought in America we do. I thought we're supposed to look at all different aspects of the problem so we can apply the right solution, not just one draconian measure that an entire party wants to ram down the American people's throats. And that's what continues to happen today. We're only being forced to listen to one side. Tita says, so it's the no masking, no testing, the misinformation that killed the other hundreds of thousands? Huh. I don't need anybody, no government, to school me on hygiene and sanitation and to be safe and always wash my hands, etc. Especially in a pandemic. So you drank the Lysol too when he told a cost to take a sip. I'm not sure what he's talking about, but basically saying, listen, I really don't need anybody to tell me to wash my hands. We know how to solve getting better. And the masking, the no testing, the misinformation. He's saying, so that's what really killed the hundreds of thousands? Agent O says, right away they were telling the sick to go home. They would not treat the symptoms. If you had the flu, they screwed you on that too. Once on your deathbed, they finally admit you to the hospital to let the ventilator kill you. Nice, people, and that is the truth. Listen, notice how we're not using ventilators anymore. Okay, obviously I can't speak to the tune of what's right here because I'm not a doctor, but I do look at what's happened. We put everybody on ventilators in the beginning of the pandemic, and look how many people died. Now they're not putting people on ventilators. I've talked to nurses. I have spoken to doctors about this. Ventilators could be a very big reason as to why so many people died. Again, nobody knew what they were talking about. Trump did not recommend people go on ventilators, so you can't put that blame on him. But a lot of people who were put on ventilators died at a very, very rapid pace, where now they're being treated with other measures. Notice how there's not a lot of talk about ventilators anymore. So this comment, I think he's very much on the right page. He's very much on the right track. Finally, finally they admit you to the hospital to let the ventilator kill you. Great job, people. And I do think the ventilator killed a lot more people than if they didn't use them, because we're now not using them and a lot more people are not dying. So spare me the whole Trump didn't know what he was doing or Trump didn't take it seriously. Because a lot of people in the beginning of this pandemic had no idea. Nobody knows. The fact of the matter is that without the coronavirus vaccine, how many more millions of people would have died? Yet we don't want to talk about that. We only want to talk about the fact that Trump killed 450,000 people. Okay, what about the other 150,000 people that Biden's now killed? Seeing that presidents are now responsible for killing their citizens, Biden's killed 150,000 people, even after knowing exactly what to do. Where's Fauci now? Where's BRIX now? Where's all these doctors now? Why are people still dying? Coronavirus cases are now spiking once again. Deaths are spiking, even after masks, after the vaccine. So who's right? We don't know. The answer is we have no idea. But everybody wants to blame the Trump administration, when the Biden administration isn't doing anything themselves to curb the pandemic either. So rightly so, Trump absolutely has a reason to come out with this statement. And if you guys are just joining me now and you haven't seen the statement, I'm not going to read it again, but go back to the middle of the show and you can take a look at the full statement. But he comes out with a statement slamming Fauci and BRIX, rightly so, and saying, wait a second, you guys had no idea what you were talking about. I gave you your time. You weren't quick enough. The decisions you were coming out with were not doing anything to help the American people. Democratic governors were taking it upon themselves to do whatever they wanted anyway, regardless of what I said. And now you're putting all the blame on me. So Trump's not going to bend over and take it. He's going to come back and tell us the real story, what really happened. And I'm sure his administration could back it up. It's not like I sit here and just listen to Trump and say, well, Trump said it, so it's true. No. I look at everybody else who worked on his administration. Again, if you do your research, rather than just listening to conspiracy news networks, CNN, who the left tend to just take as gospel, you'll actually start to learn the truth here, people. And that's all I'm suggesting you do at the end of the day. Just research. That's all you got to do is do a Google search. Whenever I'm on CNN's Facebook fan page and I'm trolling the left, as I do quite often, because I'm like, you guys are morons. This is actually not what happened at all. And they're like, oh my God, you Trumper, you white supremacist, screw you. And it's like, hold on a second. All I'm saying is that CNN's not telling the whole truth. They're omitting a lot of facts here. Just here's some other facts for you to look at. But that's impossible for many of their viewers to do. And they're sitting here watching this video, taking it as gospel, listening to every farce sentence come out of their mouth, and worshiping every word that's dictated to them on this news source. So there's nothing substantial in this review. There's nothing substantial in the documentary. Trump's come out, he slammed it all, and the American people are calling out the bullshit for what it really is. Lachey says, so they let all those people die, and not one in the Trump party had the courage to stand up to Trumpism. What a bunch of cowards. So we clearly have a leftist liberal here. So Lachey is saying they all just kind of let Trump kill all these people and nobody stood up to Trump. I do believe Fauci had a lot to say about what should have been happened. They did stand up to Trump. They said, keep the borders open. They did stand up to Trump. They said, you shouldn't wear a mask because masks aren't going to get the job done. So you can't stand up to Trump when you don't get your way, but then when things aren't going your way because you made that call personally, then attack Trump. And that's what they continue to do. They want to take all the credit, but they don't want to take any of the blame. This is what we've seen since Biden administration took over. We've seen it time and time again. Let's go back to the video and take a little bit more of a look at the insanity that's coming out of everybody's mouths.
It is so stunning, and we know this is the first of many forensics that will be done. But does that line up with your reporting, and what new did you learn last night on the back of all the work you've done?
Well, first of all, John, I did think, as you guys have just indicated, the most stunning moment of the Sanjay's documentary, and by the way, Sanjay did a terrific job of questioning those doctors, was the...
Which were all pre-recorded and pre-scripted anyway. I mean, come on. We all know. When you do a documentary slamming Trump, you don't have random, unbiased doctors come on your set for the show. You know exactly what they're going to say. They know the questions. They know the answer. So again, he's trying to tell you they've done a wonderful job answering questions. The whole thing was scripted. We know it was scripted. Who believes this shit at the end of the day? This is just unbelievable. And these are doctors. These are top doctors in the country trying to take you for a fool.
Estimate from Dr. Birx that so many of those deaths could have been prevented. But I think what it shows, and what that clip from Dr. Birx that you just played showed, is that it wasn't just President Trump. Yes, President Trump was an outlier. He is uniquely, in American history, a president who was almost entirely consumed with his own interests, his own needs.
What do you think those own interests would be? The American people. That's what he was consumed with. We know he was. He just wanted to put America first. He wanted to keep the economy going. He wanted to keep the market at all-time highs. He wanted to prevent a Great Depression, which we will see. We will absolutely see. And for those of you who are saying, well, the markets are still at all-time highs. Yeah, that's because we haven't felt the full effects of the coronavirus pandemic yet. We have not felt the full effects of what's going to come from all of these businesses being destroyed, from all of these people losing their jobs, from unemployment being at all-time highs. Nobody wants to talk about that. They just want to talk about the fact that, see, look, Biden's in charge. 2 months later, markets at all-time highs. It takes a while for the pandemic to catch up to the markets, and it will. And mark my words, this country will see a depression like we've never seen in our lifetime. Nothing like any of our parents have seen. Something similar to post-World War II. It's going to be bad, but nobody wants to talk about it.
As opposed to those of the country. And so he was locked in on the idea that he needed to safeguard the economy and safeguard his reelection. But it also...
No, safeguard the economy. If Trump wanted to safeguard his reelection, he would have just been silent on the entire situation. See, Trump didn't have to do what he did. He could have let Fauci run the show completely on his own, made Fauci look like a total ass on his own. And then when come reelection, he'd be like, listen, I let the experts run the show. I should have taken control. That would have been a lot better play for his campaign. Trump did and said what he had to say for the better good of the American people. He didn't have to say it. He could have been just as silent as Dr. Birx. He could have sat the sidelines like Fauci. He could have thrown up his hands and blamed all the Democratic governors, but he didn't. He stuck by what he said. And that's what you get with Trump. Take it or leave it. Unfortunately, most of the country left it. And now look at the mess that we're in today over it.
Also goes to the radicalization of the Republican Party. This is a Republican Party that fundamentally does not believe in government, skeptical of government action, skeptical of science, because science has taken the political debate to places requiring government action that they...
Okay, so this guy's a moron. Okay, I don't care if he's a top doctor. He's an absolute idiot. He's talking about how we're not following the science. We have done nothing but follow the science throughout this entire pandemic. When they said mask up, it's going to curb the pandemic. It did nothing to curb the pandemic. When they said we got a vaccine out now, we're going to be able to, we'll see cases going down. They're not going down. They're continuing to rise, if anything, across certain states. Following the science would have been to follow what Governor DeSantis did down in Florida. Governor DeSantis followed the science, and he continues to follow the science. And in Florida is best off out of everybody. Sure, they have a lot of cases because they have a high population, but they have the same amount of, roughly the same population as New York, California. Yet they've got half the fatalities. Half the fatalities. Florida has roughly 0.8% death rate out of the population, where New York has 18% or 0.18% deaths. That's 2 times more cases in New York State that have died being locked down than Florida. So we have followed the science. We've done nothing but follow the science. And now we're done with masks. Most of us. We don't feel the need to get vaccinated because we have followed the science. But anybody who doesn't follow the left's agenda is considered a conspiracy theorist. Even though we have looked at the data and have made an educated decision based on what the data says, not what CNN says. But these doctors keep coming online on CNN, which we all know is very far left, progressive, liberal bullshit. They don't even try to hide it anymore. And they put doctors like this on saying that the Republicans are radicals and we don't like to follow the science and we don't like government. What the hell is this guy talking about? What does he mean Republicans don't like government? The Republican Party is government, you moron. Like, how can we not like government? Maybe you could say that about independents or libertarians, but you can't say that about Republicans because Republican Party is half the government. So it's a very bizarre statement for this top doctor to come out and say. So he's lost all credibility with me, as I hope he has with half the country. CNN viewers are sitting there drooling over his every word. But again, if you have any sort of common sense whatsoever, you're going to know that everything that comes out of this guy's mouth is total and utter BS.
They don't want to go. Climate change is an example of that. But so was the pandemic. And so it was not just the president. The people who were around the president believed in, had the same impulses as the president to be skeptical of government telling people to wear masks, to be skeptical of taking steps to safeguard public health. That's simply the nature of the modern Republican Party. And
I think Mitch McConnell, Lindsey Graham, especially Mitt Romney, would disagree with every single statement this guy just said. Ask most of the Republican Party if they felt that masks worked. I doubt they're all going to sit there and tell you they don't work. I doubt they're all going to sit there and try to tell you they wanted nothing to do with the pandemic. Most of the Republicans, especially the older GOP leaders, have been vaccinated. So this guy is just straight up lying. He's putting words in most of the Republican Party's mouths, and they're all lies. Ask how many Republicans believe what he just said, and I bet most of them will tell you they aren't. Sure, you might have the Marjorie Taylor Greens who are going to stand up to the BS and back Trump. You've got Ted Cruz, who now thinks masks are a joke, as I do, because, again, we're following the data and the science. But we didn't always think like that. We waited for that data to come in, as most Republicans did. We're just taking action now based on what the science tells us. The science says teachers could go back to school. The science says, and the CDC says, teachers do not need to be vaccinated to get their ass back in the classroom. Why aren't you following the science? So it's not about science. It's about politics. It's always been about politics. And when I go online and I call COVID a scam and people tell me it's not a scam, I know somebody who's died. I know people who've died too. What I find fraudulent about the entire thing is that our government, particularly the left, and I say the left, not the right, because the right has never really tried to lock us down. They've never tried to make a mountain out of a molehill here. They certainly didn't try to destroy this country. The left have done all of those things for personal gain, for political gain, for financial gain. And they continue to dictate and tell the American people what to do, even after the science tells us we're dealing with a virus with a 99.7% survival rate. So why aren't teachers back in school if the science says it's safe? Why are we still masking up if the science says cases continue to spike even after a year of masks? Let's have another listen.
This new administration, President Biden is different from President Trump, but so are the people working for him are different from the people who work for President Trump.
John, one more political thing that came up that I noticed last night. All of these experts, the leading medical doctors, last night, these six, I think to a person basically said that they felt that Vice President Pence, who President Trump tasked with handling coronavirus, did have good intentions. They felt that he was on their side, but almost all of them, I think, also felt that Secretary Alex Azar was not.
So how does anybody think that Pence was on their side when Pence didn't say a damn word about anything? We all know Pence's deal. Pence stayed silent. He stayed out of the limelight because Pence had his own hidden agenda. And now they're talking about Pence potentially running for president in 2024, which he stands absolutely no chance because Pence, in the way that he handled the election situation or the lack of supporting the president, destroyed any credibility and any chance that he has of coming even close to a presidential bid in 2024. And if the GOP puts him forward, they're absolute idiots for doing so. I don't think they will. I don't think Mitch McConnell would be as dumb to put Pence forward in 2024 because they know the Trumpers will never back this guy. So Pence, because he stayed silent, looks like a hero. Trump could have done the same thing, but that's not Trump's character. Trump, as we all know, speaks his mind. He doesn't take shit from anybody, and he doesn't care what anybody thinks because his intentions were always to support the American people, put them first, and move this country right along, which he has done. We now have a new president in charge, but the left can't keep talking about Trump. Biden continues to destroy this country, put America last, and they still want to talk about Trump. So they rallied the top expert doctors to come out and talk about how horrible Trump and the administration was. In his pursuit of the pandemic, Trump said, that's not what happened. You guys are liars. It actually went down like this. Comes out with a statement and slams Dr. Birx and Fauci, rightly so. You guys got to check out the letter. It's a great one. So, to communicate with Trump now, he's got Office 40 or 45office.com. If you haven't checked it out, go to 45office.com. Sign up for the list. You'll hear all of Trump's statements moving forward. Thank you guys so much for joining me today. Having a great show, and we'll see you tomorrow.
Thanks for listening to You Made It Political with Matt Clark. Be sure to like, follow, or subscribe to the show, or leave us a review on iTunes. And if you like our show or want to know more, check out YouMadeItPolitical.com.